Namaste. I and you pray. And so we're continuing the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. We're in book 1, and is the attainment of concentration most near as a result of this last method only, or is there some other method also for its attainment, or not? 23. Our concentration is attained by devotion to the Ishvara. By devotion, by a special kind of adoration, the Ishvara inclines to him and favors him merely because of this yogin's profound desire. Also, as a result of the profound desire for him, the yogin becomes most near to the attainment of concentration and to the isolation of the result of concentration. In order to bring forward another sutra, he puts forth the topic of consideration in the words, is as a result of this last only. The phrase or not is the remover of a doubt. 29. R is attained by devotion to the Ishvara. He discusses the words by devotion. By devotion, that is a special kind of adoration, either mental or verbal or bodily. He inclines, that is, he is brought near to him and favors him. Profound desire is a wish for something yet to come, to the effect that this thing coveted by him may be his, by this means only, and not by any other functional activity. The rest is easy. Yeah, the rest is easy. Itara. Okay, so Ishvara is repeated. But the appendix isn't giving us a translation? Because we really want to know what Ishvara means in a... Okay, I'm going to have to look this up before doing the next video, don't I? But it is now asked, who is this being that we have called the Ishvara, as distinct from the primary substance and the self? Untouched. 24. Untouched by hindrances, or karmas, or fruition, or by latent deposits, the Ishvara is a special kind of self. The hindrances are undifferentiated consciousness, and the rest, 2-3. The karmas are good. Kuchala are evil. The fruition is the consequences, which these evolve. The latent deposits, achaya, are subconscious impressions. Vasana, corresponding to these fruitions, these hindrances, and karmas, and fruitions, and latent deposits, although they are found in the central organ, manas, are attributed to the self. For it is he that is said to be the experiencer of the results of these in the central organ, just as the victory or defeat, which depends on the combatants, is attributed to their lord, Svamin. For the Ishvara is a special kind of self who is untouched by this kind of experience. So, is the Ishvara to be referred to as a okay, we're looking back at 20. So Ichara could be your higher self. So devoting to developing your higher self. Is that what it means? I get the impression that Ichara is something that's worshipped. Then there are those who have obtained isolation, and those who are in isolation. Kavalan are many. Now these, by severing the three instruments of bondage, have obtained isolation, and the Ichara's relation to this isolation belongs neither to the past nor to the future, but is eternal. Thus, it is not with him, but with the ordinary liberated self, that there has been expressly made known a terminus, a quo of bondage, purva, bandhakate, nor is it with him, as it is with one whose body is resolved into primary matter, that there is a terminus ad quoem, when bondage might reoccur. But he is, at all times, whatsoever liberated, and at all times, whatsoever the Ishvara. But it might be asked that the universally admitted eternal superiority, utkarsa, of the Ishvara, which results from his assuming a sattva, a perfection, prakrishta quality, has that any proof to authorize it, or is it without proof? The reply is his sacred books, Shastra, are its proof. But then, again, it may be asked, what proof have the sacred books? The reply is that their proof is in the perfect quality of his sattva, inasmuch as both the sacred books and the superiority reside in the Ishvara's sattva. There is a never beginning relation between the two. From these sacred books, therefore, this proves to be true that he is at all times whatsoever liberated, and that at all times whatsoever the Ishvara. Now this is preeminence. Ichvarya is altogether without anything equal to it or excelling it. Well, in terms of what you're capable of, but certainly you don't become a god. Because you're going to realize that you don't know let's be honest, no matter what you do, you're going to realize that you don't know everything, you're not everywhere, and you're not all powerful. There's always going to be a limit to that. For to begin with, it cannot be excelled by any other preeminence, because whatever might seem to excel it would itself prove to be that very preeminence we are in quest of. Therefore, that is the Ishvara, wherein we reach this uttermost limit of preeminence. Nor again is there any preeminence equal to his. Why not? Because when one thing is simultaneously desired by two equals, the one saying is that this be new, and the other saying, let this be old. If the one wins his way, the other fails in his wish, and so becomes inferior. and two equals cannot obtain the same desired thing simultaneously, since that would be a contradiction of terms. Therefore we maintain that in whomsoever there is a preeminence that is neither equaled nor excelled, he is the Ishvara, and he is, as we said, a special kind of self. Okay. Well, becoming one in purpose, in the surrender. So you're not separating in your choices from God. That definitely happens. He anticipates the object that the universe, Vichva, is pervaded by animate and inanimate beings only, and by nothing else. Consequently, if the Ishvara be inanimate, then he is primary substance, pradhana, since what is evolved from primary substance also falls within primary substance. And by this hypothesis, he could not be made inclined, since he is inanimate. Or on the other hand, if he be animate, still, since the energy of intellect is indifferent. Audasina. Audasinya. And since, insofar as he is not in the round of rebirths, it has no feeling of personality or other hindrance. How can the energy of intellect be inclined, or how can profound desire have anything to do with energy of intellect? In alluding to this, he says, but now, primary substance. He gives the reply to the objection in the following Sutra 24. Untouched by hindrances, our karmas, our fruition, are by latent deposits. The Ishvara is a special kind of self. Preeminence? So the essence, not the quality. Okay. So the karmas, you remember cause, effect, action, not what a lot of people may mean when they say karma. That's not really, karma's going to get you. It's like, it doesn't work that way. Karma is just what happens. The hindrances are indifferentiated consciousness and the rest, for it is these that, by the stroke of various kinds of misery, hinder a man within this round of rebirth, good, kuchala, or evil, are merit and demerit, and by a figurative expression, they are called karma, because they proceed from karma. Fruition is the birth and length of life, and the kind of experience, Book 2.13, corresponding to these, the subconscious impressions corresponding to the fruitions. These subconscious impressions are called latent deposits because they lie in the ground of the mind stuff. For until that particular karma, that is, some demerit, which precipitates nirvartaka, the birth of an individual as a young elephant, makes manifest an impression, bhavana, latent to his mind stuff, which is characterized by a previously existing and potential kind of experience proper to a young elephant. For so long, that karma is not capable of producing the experience proper to a young elephant. Therefore, it proves to be true that this impression which produces the experience, anubhava, of being born as a young elephant corresponds to the fruition as a young elephant. It might be said, such things as hindrances, inasmuch as they are properties of the thinking substance, can by no means whatsoever touch the self. Accordingly, merely by mentioning the word self, the absence of any trace of these hindrances is established. Consequently, what need is there of the words hindrances, are karmas and the rest. In reply to this he says, these hindrances and karmas and fruitions and latent impressions, although they reside at the central organ, manas, are attributed to the self, who is in the round of rebirths. Why? For it is he that is said to be the experiencer of the results of these in the central organ. That is to say, he is the thinker, Chittayitter, consequently the Ittvara, because he is a self, comes into relation with these. For this reason, because they are only attributed to the self, it is consistent to make a denial of this relation. This he does in the word who. For the Ittvara is a special kind of self, who is untouched by this kind of experience, namely, that also found in the thinking substance, and common to the selves in general. It is a special kind, in that it is specialized and discriminated from all other selves, desirous of pointing out what is not to be included in the words a special kind. He first raises a counter-objection, paratodana, and then rebukes it in the words, now these have attained isolation. 1. There is bondage to the primary matter, in the case of those whose bodies are resolved into primary matter. 2. There is the bondage to evolved matter, in the case of the discarnate. 3. There is bondage to sacrificial gifts, in the case of those who partake in the experience of objects, supernal or not supernal. These are those 3 well-known instruments of bondage for those whose central organs are subliminally refined, samskrita, by impressions from primary matter, attained to resolution into primary matter only after the body is broken up. For others, the liberated selves, the terminus ad quo is expressly made known. Accordingly, the terminus ad quem alone is mentioned as applying to those whose bodies are resolved into primary matter, although the terminus ad quo also applies to them. But in this case of the Ittvara, both the terminus ad quo and the latter terminus are denied. Having stated the case in brief, he now gives the details in the words, but he is at all times whatsoever liberated, and he is at all times whatsoever the Ittvara. He possesses preeminence in richness of knowledge, and of action, and of power. With reference to this, he asks, that universally admitted, which perception and action are impossible in the case of the energy of intellect, which does not enter into mutations, in case this be admitted. And if it be said that therefore a substrate must be supposed to be made up of pure sattva, without rajas and tamas, then the Ittvara, who is at all times whatsoever liberated, cannot be in the relation of proprietor to his property towards an effulgence, utkarsa, of the sattva, at a mind stuff which depends on undifferentiated consciousness. In reply to this, he says, from his assuming a sattva, a perfect prakrita quality, in the case of the Ittvara, there does not exist, as is in the case of the ordinary man, a relation caused by undifferentiated consciousness, a proprietor to his property. With the sattva of mind stuff, that relation is expressed by the resolve, by the teaching of knowledge, and right living, dharma. I will lift up beings encompassed by the 3 anguishes from the great sea of the state after death, pratya. So, see, it's important thing that we don't fall for such a thing as my karma overran my dharma. It's like, well, right living, as it can be said, social order. Well, my cause and effect just yeah. Well, you made some mistakes. It doesn't mean that the social or that there's no longer anything like. But you know, things mean different in different languages. It's like an American jihad and Sharia means something different than they do in Arabic, and particularly in the Islamic context. But so let's look at what terms mean in their spiritual and their linguistic context that we're saying they're from, right? And this knowledge and right living cannot be taught unless there be an abundance of excellence and the adequacy of his knowledge and of his activity. And there cannot be this abundance of excellence unless this sattva be assumed, which has been purified from the stains by the removal of rajas and tamas. With this resolve, the excellent one reflects and assumes a sattva of perfect quality. Although he is untouched by undifferentiated consciousness, it appears as if he were under the illusion of identifying himself with undifferentiated consciousness, and as if he were ignorant of the real nature of undifferentiated consciousness. But he does not deal with undifferentiated consciousness as if it were undifferentiated consciousness as such. The actor who takes the role of Rama and represents the different kinds of behavior belonging to the character is not, of course, confused as to his real personal identity, for he knows that this role is only a deliberately assumed form and not his form in reality. An objector might say, this may be so. It may be true that the Exalted One must assume sattva in order to uplift the world. On the other hand, his desire to lift up is based on the assumption that this sattva, inasmuch as this desire is also derived from primary matter, the fallacy of mutual interdependence results. In reply to this, he says, eternal. This objection might be true if this were the first creation, but the succession of creations and contractions of worlds is from time without beginning. So obviously there's something above us, right? Or something preceding us, And when the period of the desire for the contraction has come to a full end, then the Exalted One, while in the act of contemplating within himself, I must assume a sattva of perfect quality, contracts the world. At the time, the sattva of the Ishvara's mind stuff becomes subconsciously impressed by a contemplation, and although the Ishvara's mind stuff be tending towards a homogeneity with primary matter, still, when the period of great mundane dissolution has come to a full end, under the pressure of the subconscious impression of the contemplation, it enters into a mutation of precisely the same kind as a state of sattva, in precisely the same way Chaitra contemplates, tomorrow I must get up just at daybreak, and then after having slept gets up at that very time, because of the subliminal impressions resulting from his contemplation. Consequently, since the worlds are from time without beginning, and in so far as much as the Ishvara's contemplation and his assumption of the sattvas are eternal, there is no logical fallacy of interdependence, nor can it be urged that the sattva of the Ishvara's mind stuff does not pass out of the phenomenal state into homogeneity. homogeneity, with primary matter. For that which, by reason of its subconscious impression, never becomes homogeneous with primary matter, is not secondary matter, pradhanika. And again, it is not energy of intellect, because it is non-perceptive, ajna. This being the meaning, one might assume another kind of thing which could not be proven by any source of valid ideas. This too would be a quite groundless assumption, because there is no other kind of thing distinct from primary matter and the self, has this kind of universally admitted and eternally superiority of the Ishvara any proof to authorize it, and it is based on any source of valid ideas, or is it without proof, and not based on any source of valid ideas? The answer is in the phrase, sacred books, shastra, are its proof. The sacred books are the revealed word, shruti, and the tradition, smriti, and the epics and the Puranas. In their original, per se, or in their are the spiritually authorized ones, not per se. Basically, what we have isn't that. We have adulterated versions, we have invented versions, we have people that, they like to compile sacred histories, but are they really as such? He brings forward an objection in the words, what proof have the sacred books? For sacred books presuppose that there is inference and perception, and no one can perceive or infer the perfection of the Ishvara's sattva. Again, there is no ground for saying that the sacred books have their source in a perception by the Ishvara. For even if we imagine him saying that he perceives the sacred books, he would then be speaking to publish abroad his own preeminence. This is inconceivable, since no one could imagine that the Ishvara would boast. So obviously we're talking about different from God, right? Such is the objector's meaning. In rebuttal, he says that they have their proof in the perfect quality of his sattva. This is what he intends to say. Incantations mantra and the medical Vedas are composed by the Ishvara. In these two cases, their authoritativeness is granted by reason of their adequacy in action. This adequacy is undoubted because there is no failure to effect purpose. The authoritativeness is granted. He shows that it is not based upon experimental evidence, and in the case of different herbs, and of the particular combinations of one herb with another, and in the case of incantations insofar as single syllables are connected or excluded, no one who uses only profane methods of proof could, even in 1,000 lives, make the connections and exclusions. Furthermore, there is no ground for asserting that connections and exclusions of the proper herbs or syllables are a result of verbal communication, agama, and that the verbal communication is the result of these connections and exclusions, on the ground that the succession of these two, verbal communication, connections, and exclusions, forms a series from time without beginning. The reason for this is that the succession of these two is severed at the time of a great mundane dissolution. Neither is there any ground for saying that there is no method of proving that this great mundane dissolution, for he will set forth, is identical with it in substance. There is evidently a heterogeneous mutation occurs of the original homogeneous mutation, milk. Analogous, milk or sugar juice, similar substances assume various forms such as curds or trecle, and so forth. And it is evident that the heterogeneous mutation presupposes the homogeneous mutation. So in the point at issue, the primary substance can also have heterogeneous mutations by assuming such forms as the great thinking substance and the personality substance. Occasionally also it can have a homogeneous mutation, and its homogeneous mutation is the state of equipoise of the primary substance. Moreover, this is of the great mundane dissolution. There is therefore a great mundane dissolution. To revert to the argument that the authoritativeness of sacred books is not experimentally to be found. Accordingly, the Exalted One is the first of all the composers of the incantations and of the medical Vedas. Hence, it must be acknowledged that, in so far as the obscuration due to the stains of Rajas and Tamas have been removed, the substance of his thinking substance illuminates everywhere. To resume the argument, Tathacha, because he was aiming to give instruction in worldly happiness and in eternal bliss, incapable of test by experience here. The Vedas as a whole were composed by the Ishvara, and must also be supposed to have their source only in the perfect quality of his thinking substance, and in the superiority of the substance, sattva. There is no possibility of error or deceit, which have their origin in rajas and tamas. This is established that the sacred books have their proof in the perfect quality of his sattva. A further objection, this may be so. But then, if the sacred books make known the perfection insofar as they are the effect of the perfection, there would be an inference from effect to cause, Chesavat. But that would not give us a verbal communication, agama. Rumbly in the tumbly. And there again, replying to this, he says, inasmuch as both the sacred books do not make known a relation of cause and effect, but do make known the correspondence from time without beginning between the word expressing a meaning, vachaka, and the thing expressed, vachya. For the perfection and I'm going to stop there for the time.